It started as a simple adventure. 4 friends, Mark, Jenna, Caleb, and Lisa, decided to hike deep into an isolated wilderness, far from roads, cell signals, or anyone else. They were confident in their skills, carrying packs heavy with supplies, flashlights, and tents. The sun hung low in the sky as they entered the dense forest. Shadows stretched long across the forest floor, and the air smelled of damp earth and fallen leaves. At first, the hike was uneventful. Birds chirped, squirrels darted across the underbrush, and laughter filled the air. But as they left the main trail, the forest seemed to close in. The path became narrow, barely discernible, and the trees crowded so tightly that sunlight barely touched the ground. Even the birds went silent. The wind seemed hesitant, whispering through the leaves as if warning them. By late afternoon, they reached a small clearing with a narrow stream cutting through jagged rocks. Jenna noticed unusual marks on a tree, deep, spiraling scratches that looked nothing like animal claws. "That doesn't look natural," she whispered. Caleb scoffed. "It's probably just a bear or some old damage. Don't start freaking out yet." But unease settled over the group. As the sun sank lower, fog began creeping across the forest floor, moving unnaturally fast. The air grew colder with every passing minute. They decided to set up camp, but even that felt wrong. Mark struck a match to light a fire. The flames flickered and cast strange shadows that seemed to move independently. Just beyond the circle of light, a dark shape darted between trees, too large to be a deer, too quiet for a person. "Did you see that?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. "Probably just a trick of the light," Caleb muttered, but his tone betrayed his unease. Night fell completely. The forest seemed alive in the darkness. Strange sounds echoed, low growls, snapping branches, and faint whispers that drifted through the fog. Jenna thought she heard someone calling her name, but when she turned, only the fog remained. Around 2:17 a.m., terror struck. A scream ripped through the night, blood-curdling and human. Mark was gone. His sleeping bag lay zipped tight, but the fire was out. Nothing remained except a faint, muddy footprint leading into the fog. Panic consumed the group. Flashlights on, they ventured after him. The forest felt endless. Every step seemed to bring them deeper into a maze. Shadows danced at the edge of their lights, moving with a life of their own. Suddenly, a whisper, soft, unintelligible, brushed past Jenna's ear. It sounded urgent, angry. Lisa screamed, pointing at a figure at the edge of the fog. A humanoid shape, impossibly tall and hunched, its eyes glowing faint red. It tilted its head, almost mockingly, then vanished. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed. Exhaustion set in. The forest seemed to mock them. Familiar landmarks disappeared. Paths twisted back on themselves. Every time they thought they were heading the right way, they found themselves deeper inside the fog. They argued, fear pushing them to the edge. Caleb insisted they keep moving forward. "We can't stay here, we'll freeze." Jenna shook her head. "We're just walking in circles. Something's wrong here." Lisa began hallucinating. She saw Mark standing among the trees, waving, smiling, then disappearing. Every time she blinked, the image returned, closer. She stumbled backward, tripping over roots. Caleb grabbed her, insisting she was imagining things, but even he wasn't entirely convinced. They stumbled across a shallow ravine. There, more scratches adorned the trees, fresher than ever. Small bones littered the ground. Animal. Maybe human. They couldn't tell. The fog grew thick, wrapping around them like hands. Suddenly, Caleb disappeared. 1 second he was holding Lisa's arm. The next a branch snapped behind him, and he was gone. Only a terrified scream echoed before silence claimed the forest again. Jenna and Lisa were left alone. Desperate, they wandered blindly. They began to see figures in the fog, shadows darting just out of reach. Sometimes it looked like Mark, sometimes like Caleb. Each time, the figures vanished when approached. At dawn, they stumbled upon a small, abandoned cabin, barely visible through the fog. Inside, the walls were carved with scratches, spiraling toward the ceiling. Words were etched in desperation. He never came back. Never come back. They spent the day inside, too terrified to leave. Outside, whispers grew louder, almost chanting, but they couldn't understand the words. Shadows moved against the walls, flickering like they had a mind of their own. By nightfall, they had no choice. They left the cabin, following a faint stream they hoped led out. The forest had become a maze of fog, shadows, and twisted trails. At one point, Lisa thought she heard Mark calling her name from behind a tree. When she turned, nothing was there, and the fog seemed thicker. Hours later, exhausted and near collapse, they finally reached a trail that led back to the edge of the forest. Authorities were called to search for Mark and Caleb, but weeks of searching yielded nothing. No footprints, no remains, only claw marks on trees and the fog that seemed to linger unnaturally, even in daylight. Years later, Jenna claimed that whenever she hikes alone, she hears faint voices calling names in the wind. Lisa refuses to step back into the forest at all. Some nights, they both swear they see glowing red eyes at the edge of the trees, watching, waiting. The wilderness holds its secrets. Those who wander too far sometimes vanish without a trace. The forest does not forget, and those who disappear never return. Mark and Caleb vanished. The forest took them. And the echo of their screams remains, carried on the wind, waiting for the next hiker to listen too closely. It began as a weekend adventure. 5 friends, Ethan, Sarah, Lucas, Mia, and Ryan, were seasoned hikers who loved exploring remote mountains. Blackridge Peak had long been whispered about by locals: dangerous trails, sudden storms, hikers disappearing. But they laughed it off. Adventure called louder than caution. The morning air was crisp, the leaves golden with fall. Birds chirped, the sun filtered gently through the treetops, and the friends hiked with easy chatter, their laughter bouncing off the cliffs. Ethan led, confident and energetic. Sarah, cautious but curious, noted the subtle changes in the forest, trees twisting unnaturally, rocks stacked oddly, and patches of fog that seemed to move against the wind. By noon, the trail narrowed and visibility dropped as fog rolled down the mountainside. The distant peaks were shrouded in clouds, their jagged silhouettes dark against the pale sky. Mia, the most observant of the group, noticed deep scratches on a boulder near the trail. "Those look intentional," she said, running her fingers along the grooves. Lucas laughed nervously. "Probably bears or wind erosion." "Don't overthink it." But a sense of unease began to grow. Shadows moved oddly in the fog. Faint whispering echoed between cliffs, and every sound, branch snapping, loose rocks tumbling, felt amplified, almost deliberate. By late afternoon, the group reached a narrow plateau overlooking a canyon. Thick mist rolled through the valleys below. The sun was setting, painting the peaks blood red. The friends decided to set up camp here, but the wind howled like a chorus of lost voices. The air was unnaturally cold, and even their insulated jackets seemed inadequate. Night came quickly. A crescent moon barely pierced the fog. Ethan lit a small fire. Shadows danced wildly across the rocks and mist. Then, a sudden movement caught their eyes. a tall, dark shape moving across the ridge, too large for a human, too fast for a deer. Mia screamed. "Did you see that?" Ryan tried to calm her. "It's probably an animal, or our imagination." But it wasn't imagination. Something was watching them. Something inhuman. Hours passed, and the fog thickened. Strange whispers floated on the wind, calling their names, but distorted, almost mocking. The group huddled together, tension snapping at every sound. At 2:13 a.m., Ethan vanished. 1 second he was next to Sarah. The next, a scream cut abruptly short. Only a faint footprint led into the fog. Panic erupted. Lucas and Mia ran after him with flashlights, but visibility was almost zero. Shadows seemed to move against the direction of their light. Every step deeper into the fog distorted the trail, cliffs and paths appearing unfamiliar. Then the hallucinations began. Sarah swore she saw Ethan waving from the fog, beckoning them forward. Mia saw glowing red eyes on the cliff edge. Each time they ran toward the figures, they vanished. Panic twisted into terror. Hours blurred together. Exhaustion set in. Lucas tried reasoning. "We have to stay together. Follow the ridge to the east." But the ridge seemed endless, fog shifting like waves. The mountains themselves felt alive, groaning, moving, reshaping the terrain. By dawn, they stumbled upon a rocky overhang, a small abandoned cabin embedded into the cliff. Inside, the walls were carved with deep, spiraling scratches and a chilling message: "Leave now or stay forever." The temperature inside dropped sharply. The shadows flickered violently, though there was no light source. The friends huddled in silence, listening as whispering grew louder, echoing off the walls, surrounding them from every angle. Exhausted, they decided to leave once the fog thinned. But the mountains had other plans. Paths they had followed before now led back to the cabin. Cliffs seemed steeper, rocks sharper. The ridge shifted subtly, subtly enough to disorient them, subtly enough that the forest and rocks themselves seemed alive. Suddenly, Ryan vanished. A scream ripped through the fog. Sarah tried to follow, but tripped on unseen roots, tumbling into a shallow ravine. She managed to cling to a rock, her hands raw, her heart pounding. Lucas called to her, but the echo was wrong, delayed, distorted, like the mountains themselves were mocking them. The fog thickened again, swallowing cliffs, trails, and landmarks. Mia, trembling, claimed she could hear Ethan and Ryan calling from just beyond her vision. The others argued, their hallucinations, but the whispers persisted, twisting, urgent, and almost angry. Night fell again. Cold and hunger gnawed at them. They huddled together atop a jagged ridge, trying to stay awake, fearing sleep would mean vanishing. Shadows moved in the fog, sometimes taking forms that resembled their friends, sometimes completely alien. By dawn, only Lucas and Sarah remained. They stumbled blindly down a narrow mountain pass, sun barely cutting through the dense mist. They finally emerged onto a safe trail near the forest edge. Authorities were called, but Ethan, Mia, and Ryan were never found. Only Lucas and Sarah survived, traumatized, their stories barely coherent, their voices trembling. Years later, locals report strange occurrences near Blackridge Peak. Hikers hear faint whispers calling their names, shadows stretching across cliffs, and sudden mists that swallow entire ridges. Some say the mountains themselves remember, and the lost still wander somewhere in the fog, echoing across Blackridge Peak forever. Lucas sometimes dreams of Ethan and Ryan, calling him from the fog, their voices distorted, trapped in the endless mountains. and Sarah refuses to step anywhere near the peak, fearing the echoes will claim her too. The mountains are patient, the fog waits, and the echoes of those who vanish will never truly leave.